see it. Paused it because I wasn't sure it was going live. Yeah, I'm now doing it again. Chairman, we are now streaming live, so you can begin the meeting.
Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome everyone to Breckland Council's virtual planning committee meeting. This meeting will be live streamed on the council's social media channels and will be recorded. Once you join the meeting, please remain on mute, which avoids any unnecessary background noise disturbing the meeting. Controls to mute or unmute are displayed on your screen. Julie Britton, Democratic Service Officer, will take the roll call at the end of this presentation, which will confirm the attendance. Could you please ensure that you unmute your microphone before speaking to confirm attendance, and then mute your microphone, as no response will assume that a planning committee member is not in the meeting. Each application has an allotted time slot. There may be an occasion when the time runs over and therefore attendees will remain in the waiting room until such time that application is ready to be heard. If for any reason the discussion finishes earlier than the time slot given, the meeting will be paused. I will work through the agenda, inviting ward member, applicant, etc. to introduce and speak on each item as appropriate. Attendees for each application will be held in the waiting room until such time their application is heard. Ward members in attendance who have registered to speak on an application will be asked to speak last. A speaker will be given a maximum of 3 minutes, or in the case of more than one objector or supporter wishing to speak, up to a maximum of 3 minutes in total will need to be shared. Where an applicant and their agent intended to speak, the 3 minutes is split between the two, other than when speaking. Speakers will remain on mute. If you try to speak when not invited to, you may be required to leave the meeting. I will then check with the Democratic Services Officer in attendance if there are any members who wish to ask a question. If wish to ask a question, please do this by clearly raising your hands, and please remain on mute until invited to speak. I will seek declarations of interest in the usual manner. Members with a declaration should indicate this by raising their hand. The Democratic Service Officer in attendance will invite the councillor to unmute, declare their interest to the chairman. The councillor will at the relevant time be removed from the meeting and placed in the virtual waiting room until discussion and voting on that item has completed, after which they will return to the meeting. Once the application has been discussed and all questions answered, I will ask for a proposer and a seconder. This again should be done by raising your hand. The Democratic Service Officers will then invite each councillor to speak in turn. If any member should experience IT issues during the presentation and does not ask for it to be repeated, they will be unable to vote on the application. For each item, all members will need to confirm that they have heard the application in full before the vote is taken. A roll call will be given on each member to cast their vote, either for, against, or abstain. Please can I remind members that they will need to unmute themselves when responding. So, Julie, can I get you to call the roll, please?
Chairman. Councillor Nigel Wilkin.
Here.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Present.
Councillor Attewell.
Here.
Councillor Bowes. Councillor Brame.
Present.
Councillor Marion Chapman-Allen. Councillor Marion Chapman-Allen. We'll come back. Councillor Harry Clark.
Present.
Councillor Helen Crane, Councillor Vera Dale,
Present.
Councillor Digan,
Present.
Councillor Keith Gilbert,
Here.
Councillor Keith Martin.
Present.
And Chairman, we have Councillor Hilary Bushell and Councillor Kybird in attendance as substitutes.
Thank you very much. My team for today, I have with me, we do have Mike Horn, who's solicitor to the council. That was a bit of a stutter there for some reason. My head of development control, which is Rebecca Collins. We also have Simon Wood somewhere, but he's not on my screen. He's hiding up somewhere, I think. And we have Naomi Minto, and of course we have Julie Britton, our Democratic Service Officer. Oh, I can see you now, Simon. Sorry, you moved about on my screen. Okay, thank you very much. We're going to start this meeting now then. First of all, so can I start at item 1, which is the minutes to be agreed. I will take them that you agree unless otherwise. Would you like to raise a hand if you have an item that you disagree with the minutes? Okay, I think you're all in agreement. Thank you. Those minutes are approved. Julie, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Can we just come
Horn.
back to the members who were missed off the roll call, please? I think there's Marion Chapman-Allen and maybe one or two others. I don't know, but
Present, Chairman.
yeah, there we go. Thank you, Marion.
Thank you, Mr. Horn. So item 2 is apologies and substitutes, which we've obviously had the clarification that we are missing Councillor Bowes and Councillor Crane, and standing in we have Councillor Bushell and Councillor Kybird. So I thank those 2 members for standing in. Very good of you. Thank you. Item 3 is declaration of interest and representations received. I will take them as each item is raised. Item 4, Chairman's announcements. One first thing which I've already had written down here is the Chairman's panel was received very well. That invitation is open to other members. If you want to come along and have a listen, please feel free to do so. Also, on your behalf, Councillor Crane is not here today because she's had an operation, and I believe she's going to be off for a short while. So I send our wishes of good wealth, health, and everything else to her. I'm sure it's not COVID. I've been told she had an operation, but whether there's an operation to cut COVID out, I very much doubt it. So don't worry too unduly. Next item is item 5, request to defer applications. Rebecca, do we have any items? Thank you.
Yes, we've got 2 requests to defer items. Item 8A at Harling, that was already a deferred item. We've requested to defer that again while we await some additional highways information. And item 9B at Banham, again, we have a request to defer that application while the applicants provide some further highways information. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Item 6, urgent business, while you're still there. Do we have any items of urgent business you'd like to raise?
No, thank you, not today.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Roger Attewell would like to speak, Chairman.
I do apologise. Councillor Attewell, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick one. It's been brought to my attention, and Mr. Wood can clarify this for me. It's been brought to my attention during the COVID crisis, we weren't accepting postal letters of complaint or support from residents. And I believe that that's going to be changed. So we are now accepting postal letters by post, particularly for elderly people who can't use a computer. Or don't know anybody that does, that can help them. It's good if they've got any objections they want to raise on an application, they can do so by post. So could you just confirm that letter has been amended and now for the website, and also when it goes out with new applications, I think we write to the neighbours, so that's now updated to say you'll accept postal comments. Thank you.
If I can, Chairman, just very quickly to update on that. Councillor Attewell's correct. During the early parts of the COVID emergency, we were discouraging letters being sent to us by post because of difficulties of access to the office. We were still accepting them, but we couldn't guarantee that they would be scanned in time. So we're encouraging other means. We have amended the letter, and that is now being used. I can confirm that to Councillor Attwell.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on, item 7, we have local plan update. Back over to you, Mr. Wood, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Just very briefly, not really much to update beyond what we said at the last meeting. There is a meeting on the 7th of August, that's Friday of this week, to look at the vision and the issues and objectives. As I say, that's open to all members, and we expect the agenda for that to be going out either late tomorrow or very early on Wednesday. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Members okay with that, or anyone wishing to raise any items with local plan update? No. Okay, thank you. Move on to item 8, deferred applications, which there are none for this meeting, haven't just lost one. So we go on to item 9, schedule of planning applications. And today we're starting with item 9A, which is Ashall, site adjacent to Seaview Hale Road. Application number 3PL 2019-1343. And joining us, we've got Mr. Simon Brooks and Councillor Eagle. And so I hand over to Naomi for this item, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, can everybody see the presentation? So this is an outline application for planning permission with all matters apart from access reserved. It is for a development site in Ash Hill. This is the site in the wider context. This is the site in relation to the Ash Hill settlement boundary. As you can see, it is adjacent to it. This is the location and an indicative site layout plan to show how the dwellings could be laid out. And these are site photos. This is looking north along Hale Road and looking south along Hale Road. Looking northeast across the site. Looking northwest across the site. Looking southeast across the site. Looking south across the site. And back to the indicative site layout plan. Following on from the consultation process, there was an objection from the parish council. They feel that the application should be objected to on the grounds that it is outside the development boundary. Norfolk County Council Highways raised no objection to the proposal subject to conditions. The Natural Environment team raised no objection to the proposal subject to conditions, and that's the same for the Tree and Countryside Officer and the Contaminated Land Officer. 2 letters of objection were received, and the details of which are noted on the officer report. In terms of the character and appearance of the area, the application is submitted in outline only. But the indicative plan shows that 5 plots could fit on site and be potentially designed without adversely impacting the character and appearance of the area. In addition, in terms of amenity impact, the indicative plan shows that the 5 dwellings can be accommodated within the site whilst retaining good separation distances between existing dwellings. The application is unfortunately recommended for refusal due to it being located outside of the settlement boundary for Ash Hill, although it is adjacent to it. The housing target for Ash Hill, which is a service centre village, has been exceeded, and is therefore the principle of development is not established. And that is the reason for the recommendation for refusal. And that's the end. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. If we could go back to the main screen, please. Thank you. Okay, we've got Mr. Simon Brooke, please, who's the applicant, to speak. You have 3 minutes, please, sir. Thank you.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, carry.
In September 2019, the Planning Committee considered an application on this site, which your officers recommended for approval. However, it was refused when a member of the Parish Council made a last-minute objection to the committee on the grounds of a fatal accident occurring outside Teal and Widgeon cottages some 9 years ago. At the same time stating there was no footway along the road frontage of the properties in this location. Our application did provide for a footway to be provided to the end of the site. The Highway Authority had no objection to the proposals. Had the matter been deferred to the Parish Council's further concerns to be addressed, we could have done so very quickly. We were not given this opportunity because the application was refused, and we have therefore had to go through the process of submitting a new application. Following the committee's refusal, we were approached by the owners of Teal and Widgeon cottages to see if we could find a joint solution for the benefit and safety of all. This new application meets all the concerns and objections raised previously, and means the village will achieve the following planning gains. 1, the site will round off the development of the village within the 30 mph signs and will complement the built environment on the west side of the road. On entering the village from the north, there will be a clear, uncluttered view of the main street. There is a 40 mph limit prior to that. No cars will be parked on the highway as at present. A footway from the development entrance all the way into the village will be set in the verge with no reduction in the width of the carriageway or cost to the Parish Council. A proper and clear access will be made to enable retention of and maintenance for the permissive footpath access route to Ashhill Common, which is extremely popular, provided at no cost to the parish. The houses on the site will be well screened behind a fully grown hedge. This application therefore represents a one-off opportunity to address and solve two very real concerns of the Parish Council, provide a footway at no cost to parish funds. Neither the Parish Council nor the owners of Teal and Widgeon Cottage can prevent the parking of cars on the highway as at present without the joint involvement of the applicant for this permission. We therefore trust that you can see the planning merits of this application, which resolves the Parish Council's road safety concerns that arose in 2019, when the application was otherwise considered a suitable and sustainable location for development by the planning officer. If the committee are minded to approve this application, in the interest of road safety, we are happy to accept, as in 2019, a 2-year period rather than 3 years, and will bring the site to the market as soon as practical. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. We've got Councillor Eagle, please. 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm actually in support of the application, and after meeting with Ashhill Parish Council last week, discussed the points coming up with this. And again, we feel the main reason was last time it was rejected was because of the highways and the footpaths. And the two properties not linked are right on the road, and anyone who goes along that road will see it's high banked and the cars are out on the road. This is an opportunity we're not going to get again for Ashhill to get a footpath along Hale Road. We can't put one on the opposite side of the road where there's already properties, because there's a gas main. And previous development on the other side of the road, we were not allowed a footpath. So this, we can only have a footpath for Hale Road along this side of the road. And this will allow this completion, and anyone who's gone down, you can see there's cars are out the road. You have to walk, stand out to get past them. And it's a very, very popular route to go down from Hale Road to use those permissive paths. And for the rest of the villages in my ward, they do a circular route that goes along there, again, to use the permissive paths and to walk along. So really, as a highway safety, and as well as being the county council for the area, we looked at it. And just, I know since then, we as Breckland Council have moved the goalposts to say it's out of the settlement boundary, but it's adjacent to it and opposite to it. And the village and the people who walk, and we want more people to walk, are going to get a real benefit out of it. They're going to feel safer. I've walked it. It will be better and it's safe. And I do hope that the committee recognises that fact and puts through. And just on an environmental point, I would like to add, I hope the committee does actually ask that we do install Swift boxes in those properties, because there is a very large Swift and House Martin population at that end of the village. And please, I'm just, as the local ward rep, and I have liaised with the parish council, the only other thing they were concerned about was losing the permissive paths and the access there. That's being rerouted. We won't get this opportunity to get a footpath in front of those properties prior to this application again, which will leave us a gap, and a dangerous gap, roads, people with pushchairs, anything else having to go out on the road. And it is a narrow bit of a road with high banks. Thank you, that's all I have to say, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. It's open to questions from members. I've got Councillor Atwill, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like a bit of a steer from Rebecca on this, if I may. I was the one that created Mary Hell about this when it came before the committee last time and objected on the basis of the safety issue. So I'm pleased that that's been addressed. If we were minded to approve this application, how does that set us up for the future, Rebecca, in terms of the settlement boundary, and what would happen if somebody decided they wanted to put an application in further along the road adjacent to this site? Is this something that we can do by way of some sort of condition? I don't know how. I mean, I've got to say at the moment, I'm minded to support it, but I do see the policy issue with regard to the amount of development that's already been allocated for Ash Hill. So I completely get why it's been recommended for refusal on that basis. I'm just thinking of a way of how could we approve it if we were minded to do so, but at the same time ensure that in the future somebody could come along and say, well, you let that go through on that policy before because there's more development. That's the conundrum I think that members might struggle with. So I'd really appreciate your input on that, please.
Okay, if you're happy for me to go, Chairman. So obviously each case is considered on its own merits, and we have to advise you about the principal issue with policy how 3, to be really clear. So policy how 3 is set in 2 parts. The first part says that development is restricted. So apologies, I've got it in front of me. Development will normally be resisted, where the local plan housing target has been providing for, unless supported by other policies within the local plan. So that's what your policy says, councillors. So we've interpreted that policy. As you can see from the text in the report, the local plan target has been exceeded. The target was 105, we're at 119, and this will be a further 5 dwellings. We've assessed it against all other policies, and we're saying that there's no other overriding policies within the local plan that means you should defer from that in principle reason for refusal. However, councillors, members of the planning committee, you can take into consideration, quite rightly, the provision of the footpath and the additional car parking for the houses that have been named. Members, you may feel that this is overriding, and it's an other material planning consideration that is overriding in terms of the principle of development in this location. So the provision of the footway has such merit that it's overriding the in principle objection as an other material planning consideration. What I would bring to members' attention is with regards to the car parking, and this is set out in the officer report. Highways are obviously happy with the footway and the additional car parking, subject to being a condition. Roger, as you quite rightly point out, we could condition that footway to be delivered either prior to first occupation, which would be normal, or if members were really concerned about the delivery of the footway, which I don't think is reasonable. I think it should be prior to first occupation. But if you were really concerned, we could condition the delivery of the footway prior to the development commencing. We can condition the additional parking to be laid out. Again, I would suggest this to be prior to first occupation, but I would remind you that your officer report clearly says to you that we couldn't condition the residents of those dwellings to use it. So obviously we can't enforce a condition for them to use it, but we can require it to be laid out. And we do accept as officers that if off-road parking is laid out, it's more likely to be used than on-road parking. So I hope, Councillor Attewell, that answers your query, but it's a balancing exercise for you as members of the committee to balance whether you think that other material planning considerations outweighs the in-principle objection, and each case would be considered on its own merits. So any new application would be considered in the same way.
Councillor Attewell, you wish to come back?
Yes, thank you for that, Rebecca. That's very comprehensive. Could I just clarify, to the north of where the road entrance is, what is going to be along the frontage of the site? I'm looking at the plan. Obviously, we've got the red outline of the site. I presume the footpath doesn't carry on all the way along the frontage of the site. Would I be right in saying that, looking at this drawing? So is that just, is that a trod, or is that just a grass verge with a hedgerow? Could perhaps the applicant just explain what that is, please?
Mr. Brooks, please.
Thank you for the question. The footpath will come from the what will be the tarmac access to the full site and the car parking. The access to the permissive path will be between Sea View, the existing house, and the first property, but it will also continue round the back of the site, coming up from the granary site to the north. So it will continue, it will be a continuous permissive path with access adjacent to Sea View. But the footway will carry northwards to the actual hard entrance to the site.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Attewell. I could add, it will be, it's all behind a hedge, substantial hedge.
Okay, just to clarify, where I'm looking at the plan at the moment, I've got the road entrance, I've got the footpath I can see clearly that's marked in front of Teal Cottage, Widgeon Cottage, coming up towards where the road entrance is. And then above that, north of the car entrance, that's not a footpath then along the frontage of the road. So that's just going to be hedgerow, is it?
That
along the whole frontage of the site?
That'll be retained as hedgerow and highway verge.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other members with questions at all with regard to this application? No? Okay, that's fine. Now, can I confirm that all members have heard the application in full before the vote is taken? Are you all in agreement? All okay to take the vote? Okay, thank you. For this item, which is at Ashall 3PL 2019-1343, your officer's recommendation is one of refusal. So, Julie, could you take the roll, please, for the application refusal?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Attewell.
Against.
Councillor Brain.
Against.
Councillor Bushell.
Against.
Councillor Chapman-Allen.
Against.
Councillor Clark.
For refusal.
Sorry, is that, sorry, Councillor Clark, is that you're voting for it to be refused, or?
Yes, I'm going with the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Councillor Dale.
Against.
Councillor Philip Dygan.
Against.
Councillor Keith Gilbert.
For refusal.
Councillor Keith Martin.
Against.
Councillor Kai Bird.
Against.
And Councillor Wilkinson.
Against.
Thank you, Chair. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 9 against and 2 for the refusal.
Okay. Councillor Attewell.
Can I propose that we approve the application on the basis having due consideration for the highway issue, which is a significant material consideration, as eloquently put by Rebecca. We know there's been a fatality in that area in the past. I think this will resolve that. And could I also, in that proposal, ensure that the condition that the footpath is created before first occupation? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilkinson, are you seconding that?
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman, with the merit that the footpath and the highway alterations to make it safer merits the approval against the officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now your recommendation from the floor is one of approval. So can we just go through there again, Julie, and we'll go for approval, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Attewell.
For.
Councillor Wilkinson.
For.
Councillor Brain.
For.
Councillor Bushell.
For.
Councillor Chapman-Allen.
Against the proposal.
Councillor Harry Clark.
Against.
Councillor Dale.
For.
Councillor Digan.
For.
Councillor Gilbert.
Against.
Councillor Martin.
For.
And Councillor Kybird.
For.
Thank you. That's 8 for approval and 3 against. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So this item is approved. Okay, Rebecca, please. Rebecca.
Apart from the footpath being delivered prior to first occupation, are you happy to delegate the conditions to officers?
Yes, definitely. Thank you. Okay, thank you for your attendance, Mr. Brooks and Mr. Councillor Eagle. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Julie, how are we doing for time? Can we go to the Old Buckingham application?
Is that 1:30? Yes, we can. Should I just let the people?
Yeah, we've got Nick Moyes, who's the agent.
Yeah, I shall let him in now.
Are you presenting this one, Rebecca? Good. I can't see if we've got Mr. Moyes in.
Yes, we have, Chairman.
Oh, we have, yes, thank you. Okay, over to you then, please, Rebecca.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is a planning application for the erection of a straw barn at Old Buckingham on Scales Farm. You're hearing the application today because the applicant is a councillor. So here we have an aerial photography of the site in question where the straw barn's going to go. It is a large barn, it's 24 metres by 15 metres. However, we've assessed it in terms of the principle of the area and it's acceptable in that regard in terms of use and supporting an existing business. We've assessed it in terms of the visual impact on the character of the area and obviously any amenity and highways impacts with regards to the proposals. We have no objections from statutory consultees to the application and therefore we've recommended this one for approval. So here's the application site in relation to the settlement boundary for Old Buckingham, but because it's for an agricultural use, there's no requirement for it to be in the settlement boundary. And as I say, the applicant submitted information to demonstrate it's in support of an existing business. So here's the location plan showing approximately where the building would lie within the application site. Like I say, it is quite a large building of 24 metres by 15 metres. However, it's a typical farm building, as you can see in front of you, with the elevations open-sided on most elevations, and there will be its location within the application site. So helpfully, we've got some straw bales to show the proposed location of the straw barn. So here are the site photos showing it within context. You can see there is high dense vegetation at the boundaries of the site. They won't screen the proposals, but it very much will be in character with the surrounding area. Again, distance views to the site and show it is located close to that vegetation to help screen it. And we just have some distance views to demonstrate its potential height and location. So like I say, we've had no objections from statutory consultees. We've assessed it in terms of its visual impact and impact on amenities and highways. We have no objection and we're recommending this one for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. We'll go back to main screen, please.
Don't let me. Don't it let me. Sorry, Chairman.
It's okay.
It won't let me.
There you go.
There we go. Thank you.
Apologies.
Okay. Any members wishing to ask questions on this item? No, that's fine. Okay. We've got Mr. Moyes here as well. No one wishes to ask him a question. Millionaire's coming up in a few nights' time, so he might have the answer to that. No, that's fine. Thank you. Okay. So with reference to this one, which is 3PL 2020-0580 at Old Buckingham, I gather all members have heard the application before the vote is taken. You're all okay with that? Your officer's recommendation is one of approval. Julie, could you take the roll, please?
Yes, certainly, Chairman. Councillor Kybird.
Sorry, caught me on the hop. Approve.
Councillor Martin.
Approve.
Councillor Gilbert.
For.
Councillor Digan.
For.
Councillor Dale.
Approval.
Councillor Clark.
Approve.
Councillor Marion Chapman-Allen.
Or.
Councillor Bushell.
Approval.
Councillor Brame.
For.
Councillor Attewell.
For.
And Councillor Wilkinson.
For.
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous.
Yep, thank you. That's unanimously approved. This item is approved. Thank you. How are we doing for time for our next item, which would be Shropham?
1:45. So we've got 7 minutes.
Yeah, we've got about. Yep. Okay. So we'll suspend just for 7 minutes.
Okay, I shall put the Holden sheet up.
Thank you.
Chairman, it's 1:45. I shall let
Thank
the
you.
I shall let the 3 people in from the waiting room.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you. We're all in attendance. Thank you. So this item now is for Shropham, which is Rose Cottage Low Road, application number 3PL 2020-0445. This one is Naomi's. Naomi, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, so this application has been before members previously. It is a reserved matters application on Low Road. It has outline planning permission for up to 3 dwellings. This is the 3rd reserved matters application to come before committee members. So this is the application site in the wider context. This is the application site in relation to the settlement boundary. This is the indicative plan which was approved at outline stage for up to 3 dwellings. And this is the proposed site plan for the current application for 3 dwellings. This is the Low Road built development context, which shows the spacious plots within the landscape gaps around the dwellings immediately in the vicinity of the application site. And moving on to the photos, so view west along Low Road and looking east along Low Road, and some views across the application site. This is existing development along Low Road to give you an idea of some of the dwelling styles. And these are the proposed elevations for plot 1. Proposed elevation for plot 1 showing you how it would look visually. And the elevations for plot 2. And visual perspective for plot 2. And the elevations for plot 3, along with a visual perspective. And the proposed garage elevations and plans for plot 2 and 3, which are detached and handed. And back to the proposed site plan. So in terms of the consultation responses, we've had an objection from the parish council, the details of which are contained within the officer report. We've had no objection from the contaminated land officer, subject to condition. No objection from the tree and countryside officer following receipt of a revised plan and subject to condition. No objection from the historic buildings consultant, and no objection from the natural environment team, subject to a plan which has been submitted. In terms of the principle of development, as we know, that's already been accepted through the grant of an extant outline planning permission for up to 3 dwellings. In terms of the impact on the character and appearance of the area, the dwelling designs are now considered acceptable in terms of the proposed style. Furthermore, the materials proposed are considered being keeping and sympathetic to the existing built form present on Low Road. The concern of the council is the spacing between the dwellings, the proposed dwellings, having regard to the existing development on Low Road. The local planning authority considered that 2 dwellings would fit comfortably on site with sufficient spacing between them. However, we would have considered the approval of 3 subject to them being reduced further in scale to provide that visual gap between the dwellings, and so that it's more in keeping with the character and appearance of the local area. The applicant didn't want to make any further changes to the proposal, and so unfortunately in this instance it has been recommended for refusal on design grounds. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Go back to full screen, please. Before we proceed, Councillor Brame, we've not got you on visual. Can we just check that you're in the meeting, please?
I'm here, but I'm having some difficulty.
So you've actually not seen the presentation, or?
Yes, I've seen all the presentation, but my broadband is a bit slow, so I've cut my video.
Okay, you cut your video. That's fine, as long as you've seen the presentation
Yeah,
and you've heard the
all
presentation. That's fine. Thank you very much. We go to our speakers now. We've got David Napier, who is the chairman of the Parish Council. Good afternoon, Mr. Napier. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you.
You have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The appearance of the proposed dwellings is an improvement on that of the previous reserve matters applications, but the Parish Council considers that this application represents an overdevelopment, with 3 properties being too many for the site, and that it fails to enhance the character of Low Road. The layout is not good, being too close to a blind bend on this narrow road, and the Parish Council has concerns about the landscaping. In the opinion of the Parish Council, the application fails to meet the requirements of HOU 04. After the outline application for up to 3 dwellings was approved, John Berry visited the site and said that 3 dwellings were too many. The applicant for the reserves matters application, who had not been the applicant for the outline application, was advised and reduced the number of dwellings to 2, increasing their size in compensation. The committee's reasons for refusing the 2 previous reserve matters applications were, last November, the design did not respect nor was it sensitive to the character of the local area, and in March, the design of the proposals was inappropriate in terms of the scale of the 2 detached 5/6 bedroom dwellings. For this application, the applicant has replaced the agent with whom he worked for the 2 previous reserve matters applications with the agent who had handled the outline application, who has produced a plan with 3 dwellings largely similar to the plan of the outline application. When this appeared, I emailed John Berry asking if he would be willing to corroborate to Simon Wood and myself his opinion after his site visit. John replied, yes. From my site visit, I considered the 3 dwellings, particularly of the sizes shown on the plans at that time, would amount to an overdevelopment of the site relative to the character and appearance of the area and the immediate street scene. I felt that 2 dwellings would be more appropriate for this plot. The reason for the case officer's recommendation for refusal that the proposed design does not respect, nor is it sensitive to the character of the local area by virtue of its layout, scale, massing, density, and orientation is absolutely right. And may I please ask the members to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thank you. We've now got David Rogers, please, who's the agent. If you're wishing to speak, so you have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me okay? Can you all hear me okay? Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Yeah, so dear Chairman and members of the committee, I'm David Rogers and acting on behalf of Mr. Simon Hazelby for the above application. You may well recall the site having seen 2 previous schemes prepared by other agents in the past 12 months, both of which were 2 extremely large 5 to 6 bedroom 2-storey houses with integral garages. Both schemes were considered to be of scale, mass and design that did not respect the local area, which resulted in refusal. Since then, the applicant has spent time taking on board the comments raised by both committee members, the parish council and the local community. And now a completely different design approach has been adopted, which now comprises of 3 substantially smaller detached 1.5-storey dwellings, consisting of 2 3-bedroom houses and 1 4-bedroom house. Height and scale have been significantly reduced. The room sizes are now conventional and provide modestly sized dwellings. The overall bulk has been broken up by providing detached cart lodges for each dwelling. A traditional materials palette has been used, which is responsive to the vernacular, which include red brickwork, weatherboarding, render, pan tiles, which are all seen within the surrounding area. The retention of all the trees on the site, other than a single low quality field maple, which would be more than adequately replaced through the additional tree planting. The result being is that the design, scale, materials and appearance of the dwellings now respect the character and scale of the surrounding area and respond to the current residential form and layout that currently exists along Low Road. Whilst concerns have been raised regarding the proposal for 3 dwellings, it must be remembered that the outline permission was granted for 3 dwellings at committee. The proposals before you today are in accordance with the scheme submitted at outline stage, and the footprints and scale shown are no greater than what was originally approved. The site itself is well screened when viewed from Low Road by an existing established hedgerow, the majority of which is to be retained as part of the proposal, with only a small section to be removed for the site access and visibility display. Replacement improved native hedgerows would be provided to fill the existing access and replace existing poor sections of hedgerow along the site frontage. Additional hedgerow and tree planting would also be provided along plot boundaries and the rear of the site. The site is also well screened to the north and east by mature tree belts, and therefore the proposal would not be intrusive into the countryside. Each house type has a designated bird and bat box to encourage natural habitats in line with the ecologist comments received during the application process. It is clear from the images shown that the revised scheme before you is responsive, respectful and of high quality and complies with policies Gen 02 and CM 01 of the local plan. The principle of 3 dwellings was established at outline stage. The proposals provide for a well-designed and spacious layout that is respectful and sensitive to the surrounding area and development seen along Low Road.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers.
All right.
Your 3 minutes is up. Thank you. Councillor Cowan, please. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. Firstly, I'd like to point out that the outline application, which was approved, was for up to 3 dwellings, and the only matter of detail at that stage was the position of the access. So up to 3 dwellings, I think you heard Naomi say, would be quite acceptable, provided the dwellings were of an appropriate scale and size. This particular application, when we look at the site plan, the boundary between plot 1 and its neighbour, Saint Janita, is barely 2 metres, and it's a very large brick gable. And then between plots 1 and 2, you're down to about 1 metre. We have to remember that we're not in an urban or a suburban location here. We're in rural Norfolk, rural Breckland, and you've seen from the presentation by the case officer that the nature and scale, form, character of the dwellings along Low Road is fundamentally different to that which is on this particular application. There are no objections to the overall principles of the design. These designs actually reflect much more the quality of the built form that we see in Low Road, but it is very much about the density, the plot density of 3 still rather large footprint dwellings. I mean, plot 1, I think, is about 140 square meters of footprint. The other point which is giving concern is not just the access, but actually the turning availability on the site itself. We now have better access for the 3 dwellings and their cars and positioning of parking arrangements. But of course, if you want to get anything larger than a vehicle of up to about 4.5 meters onto the site and turned round, that's going to prove somewhat challenging. So Low Road, as we know, is a narrow lane. Parking for delivery vehicles, refuse collection has to happen, and it does elsewhere along the road. But removal vehicles and such will struggle to get in and out of that site. They'll have to park on the road for lengthy periods. there are concerns from the parish council on those matters. So I would sum up by saying the overall approach to design is far more acceptable for the residents of Shropsham Village, as you've heard from various speakers. But I do believe still the plot density and the scale of the development is excessive. And I would urge you to acknowledge the case officer's recommendation in this case. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. It's open to questions from members. Anyone wishing to ask questions on this item? I'll have Councillor Clark, then Councillor Attwell, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a question for Naomi. I've read the report and recall the presentations when we first saw this, and thinking about the, in particular, paragraph, I think it's 2.7. I think it's the first time I've seen this word mentioned, as it happens in one of our reports. It says this minuscule reduction does not go far enough to tip the balance in this instance. That's in terms of reduction. So what would be, as this says up to 3, but the applicant has obviously advised that 2 would be much better. What would actually tip the balance in terms of making the 3, which the applicant wants to build, smaller, make them acceptable to the LPA as it stands, Naomi? Thank you.
I think perhaps if they'd have reduced the garage sizes and centralised the dwellings better in the plots. Plot 3 is set in quite a large, spacious plot, whereas plots 1 and 2 are more crammed in. I just think the layout perhaps needs a little bit more thought, and maybe a reduction in the garages would have improved the spacing between 3 dwellings.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Attwell, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Naomi, could you put back up on the slides for me, please, the original outline drawing showing the indicative 3 plots, and then bring up the what the plots look. Yeah, so we've got that one now. That's the proposed reserve matters. I just wanted to get some sense of the scale of those compared to what was envisaged with the outline. Okay.
Okay, can you see that?
Yes, thank you. That's great. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. If we can go back to full screen, please. Thank you. Any other further questions, please, from members? No. Okay, thank you. So can I confirm that all members have heard the application in full before the vote is taken?
Chairman, Councillor Keith Martin had his hand up. I'm not sure if he had a question.
Oh, Councillor Martin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we say, we've looked at this application 2 or 3 times, and I know when the complaints came from residents, I think the balance of 2 properties would go well in with the character of the surrounding properties. All right, thank you.
Thanks for that. Thank you. Okay, members, no more questions, and you've all heard the application. So with regards to 3PL 2020-0445 at Shropsham, your officer's recommendation is one of refusal. Can I have a roll call for that, please, Julie? I nearly said show of hands.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Wilkinson?
4.
Councillor Attwell?
4.
Councillor Brame?
4.
Councillor Bushell?
Against.
Councillor Chapman Allen?
I'm for the recommendation.
Councillor Clark?
For refusal.
Councillor Dale?
Against.
Councillor Digan?
4.
Councillor Gilbert?
4.
Councillor Martin?
For.
And Councillor Kybird.
For the recommendation.
Thank you. 9 votes for refusal and 2 against, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. This item is refused then. Thank you for your time, Mr. Rogers, Mr. Napier and Councillor Cohen. Thank you very much. Our next item at Stowbeeden / Breckles. Oh, you can stay here, Councillor Cohen. Sorry, I'm just trying to get rid of you.
I'll have a different moniker, Chairman.
We have actually got about 10 minutes. Is that correct, Julie? Are you?
Correct, yes, it's not due to be heard till 2:15.
Yeah, sorry about that. We're going to have to stick to time because of other people joining to listen in and what have you. Okay, thank you. So we'll just have a break till 2:15, please. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. We only have Councillor Cowan in as the next speaker.
Thank you. I'm just waiting. Councillor Brame, are you still with us? Oh.
Chairman, when you go to the presentations, I start to lose a bit of broadband speed. So I can see all the presentation, but it's a bit blobby.
Okay.
If I turn my camera off, I can see it at the right speed.
That's fine. I will just keep asking you every time because I want to make sure you get the presentation. Okay, thank you for this one. It says Stow Beedon / Breckles, which is 3PL 2019-0897. And this is over to you, please, Rebecca.
Thank you, Chairman. So here we have an application for a single dwelling. As you can see from the description, it's a contemporary style, proposed to be self-build. And here we have a full application with all matters to be considered. So here is the application site from the aerial photography. You'll note from the officer's report that the adjacent site, so to the east of the red line, as you see in front of you, has had planning permission for a dwelling in this location. And we've got some images of that dwelling to show you in a minute what we approved as planning permission. You'll note from the parish council's comment that dwelling is actually under construction, but obviously the aerial photograph predates that construction, but it is the plot immediately to the east of the red line that you see in front of you. Obviously you see the red line in front of you on the aerial photography, and we have a location plan coming up for you next. This is obviously the application site. So the application is located in Stow Beedon, which is actually a village without a boundary. Therefore, this is a policy HAL 5 issue. Just to remind members, and obviously this is set out in the officer's report, that in order to be acceptable in terms of HAL 5, it needs to constitute infilling or rounding off, along with other matters set out in policy HAL 5, including complementing the appearance and character of the area. So here you can see the application site with the dwelling I've just mentioned in terms of history to the east shown drawn in on the application site. We consider that this is a corner location, and the only plot left in between that and two adjacent highways, this is considered to be rounding off in this location, so finishing the street seam. That wouldn't include development and now going to the south of the application site, because obviously this is bordered by two highways. So we're considering this to be rounded off, given the description of rounding off that's set out in your officer report. So obviously I've already noted the contemporary element of the description, the contemporary element of the dwelling, which is also set out in the description. You'll note from the officer report that it spends some time describing the layout of the dwelling, this curved layout. I've got some images of the elevations, but it is all to be single story. Although quite a large structure, it's to be single story. And when we see the photos, the site is surrounded by high, dense vegetation. And the report goes into some detail about the materials to be used and the contemporary design and the considerations behind that. So here's the site layout with the dwelling, access and parking. Here are the elevations. Apologies, they're quite small, but here are the elevations. But obviously what's important to note, and from the officer report, that it is single story. The fenestration is concentrated to the southern elevation away from the public highways, with at the top there you can see the northern elevation with limited fenestration within it. And then when you see the photos of the vegetation, you'll see that it's quite heavily screened from the surrounding area. So this is the elevation plans and the floor plan. This is the adjacent planning permission that I referred to on several occasions, and this is currently under construction. So just to give you a minute to have a look at the elevations for that development. And then we just move on to some site photographs. This is obviously the corner where the application site will sit behind. We've got quite a few of these showing you the corner and the vegetation and the access road. There are obviously gaps within the trees and the vegetation where you can see the site, and obviously they need to provide access into the site. And here are the site photos through the vegetation showing that it's quite an open site currently, previously stated to be grazing land. And again, some site photos showing from within the site, obviously the fencing demarcating the previous grazing land, and a photo further away just showing the existing vegetation that is in this location, and the quite well kempt hedgerow. Just thought it was quite important to show you the existing vegetation. So the application is for one dwelling as set out before. You'll note from the officer report that previously the recommendation was for approval of the dwelling. We consider that it is to be rounding off. Given the scale of it and the surrounding vegetation, it is in character with the surrounding area. Given the size of the site, there are no amenity issues. And we don't have any objections from the statutory consultees to warrant refusal of the planning application in terms of highways, etc. However, you'll note from the officer report that it was recommended for approval subject to consultation with our ecology team. You'll note from the supplementary that we've had a response back from Natural England, who do not object to the application. And Friday and uploaded to the website today, we've had a response back from our own ecologists to say they do not object to the application subject to conditions. We also consulted the Wildlife Trust, who have previously raised comments during the application process. Unfortunately, we haven't heard back from them on this date. However, the applicant has provided correspondence between them and the Wildlife Trust, and we're satisfied that it's likely that any ecology matters can be resolved if you're happy to delegate those to officers. So the recommendation would be changed to approval subject to ecology matters to be delegated to officers and be satisfactorily resolved with conditions. You'll note from the officer report that the parish council have objected, and there are representations to the application too about it being outside the settlement boundary. We'll have explained that it would be in principle acceptable in our opinion in accordance with HAL 5. They are concerned about the design of the dwelling and not meeting the other traditional aspects of those set out in the village. But as I set out, given the scale and vegetation, we consider it's acceptable in this location. And they have raised concerns about ecology. Obviously, I've just explained that we are now satisfied that all ecology matters can be suitably addressed. However, we would like to have a response from the Wildlife Trust before issuing any sort of planning decision. I would like to further add a condition, if members were agreeable, to condition the flood risk assessment that have been submitted with the application and the family flood plan, which is referenced in the officer report. However, there's been no condition applied at the end of the conditions. So I would like, with members' agreement, if they were to recommend approval, subject to the matter of ecology being delegated to officers, to add a condition with regards to flood risk and flood evacuation plan. However, subject to all that, we've recommended this one for approval.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get, I couldn't get off my mute. Okay, thank you for that, Becky. I've got Councillor Cowan, please.
He's not Councillor Cowan this time, with great respect, Chairman. I'm the agent.
Still got you down. I've still got you down to speak now.
Yeah, I'm here to speak, but as the agent, not as a councillor.
As the agent, Chairman. Okay, thank you. So we've disbanded you being a councillor.
Yeah, I changed my name.
Hurrah!
For those at sharp eyes. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Becky, for that that presentation. I just wish to clarify one or two matters. Firstly, the Norfolk Wildlife Trust have been in consultation with our ecologist, and if you waded through his however many hundreds of pages of ecological report, you will have seen an extract from an email that he had with the with Norfolk Wildlife Trust, confirming that this part of what used to be part of a county wildlife site, designated back in the later part of the 20th century, has been grazed considerably and is no longer considered a viable county wildlife site. Just as Natural England have commented that they have no ecological problems with this particular site as well. Therefore, the conditions which Rebecca is proposing go in there into the approval, should you decide to grant one, relating to ecology are perfectly acceptable. to our client. Our client has already undertaken wildflower seeding as recommended by Norfolk Wildlife Trust on the site, and has also carried out substantial planting of hedgerows, new hedgerows, elsewhere within his land ownership there. The existing house, Big Patch house that is under construction, is due for completion towards the end of September. And you will have noticed that there was another house being built literally across the road, and a further 2 have been granted planning permission by your committee in recent months. So I would absolutely agree with the case officer that this is a rounding off of this part of Stow Beedon village. There is no settlement boundary in Stow Beedon anymore. That was removed when the new local plan was adopted. So this particular site does fall fairly and squarely under HOU 05, and it is a self-build site for a bespoke house for a modern 21st century family. It's designed in order to take full advantage of the aspect and orientation and use sensitive materials which are sustainable. It's an open plan house. It's very private in the sense that it does turn its back on the road, on the weather, and provides for modern day living accommodation, which is very popular at the moment. At that point, I'll cease and take any questions if there are any from members of committee. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. It is open to questions from members. Anyone wishing to ask a question at all? Councillor Wilkinson, and then Councillor Gilbert, and then Councillor Attwell. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cowan did answer the question actually when I've been reading in the reports. The objection from the parish council believe it's outside their settlement boundary. So have they been made aware that that their boundary was removed under the Brecon local plan?
Is that a question for me, Councillor Wilkinson?
If you're the ward rep as well, whether you could answer that, or we'd have to put that over to Rebecca.
I would suggest you deal with Rebecca, please.
Yes, thank you, Rebecca.
I think there might be some confusion given the length of time that we've had the application. So you note that it dates from 2019, and obviously we didn't adopt the local plan till November 2019, so right at the end. So obviously there may be some confusion about the period of time. The period of time we've had the application is reflective of the applicants doing work with their ecologists to satisfactorily resolve those matters. So we were unable to proceed with a recommendation for approval, in my view. So yeah, I think although it may be confusing, they're referring to settlement boundary, it's because obviously the application itself has crossed local plans. And also just to assure councillors, when we adopted the local plan, obviously it was part of our release that we made all parish councils and town councils aware. Apologies.
Thank you for that. Councillor Wilkinson, just to come back on that.
Yeah, if you indulge me, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I understand that, Rebecca. It's just I feel that we do hear a lot of parish councils telling us they're ignored, they're not listened to. So I just wondered if there could be a footnote to this, if we were minded to go with a recommendation for approval, that there's a footnote to the parish council explaining their planning policy disapproval was invalid under the new local plan.
Chairman, I'm more than happy to write to them after this process and under a separate account and explain the adoption of the local plan and that they don't have a settlement boundary, and the wording of how 5 and our interpretation in relation to this application, if that's what councillors would like me to do.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Gilbert, please.
Thanks, Chairman. It's not supposed to be a direct question, but it brings up the subject of contemporary design. I know some of the local people say it doesn't fit in with the existing styles of the village. But if we don't progress and look at more contemporary design, we are going to stagnate. I mean, building design and that has evolved over hundreds and maybe thousands of years. So I'd like to see contemporary design. And I think we need to find a way of getting good contemporary design being built, you know, in the right locations. Now, you obviously couldn't put a house like this in the middle of a town unless there was a you know, a really large space. So I think we need to start considering as an authority how we approach the issue of contemporary design throughout the district, because a lot of people think, oh, Breckland, quaint chocolate box, you know, picturesque thatched cottages and nice little cottages and that. We need to move forward with design and in contemporary design. So I'd like to see more of this sort of thing coming forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Gilbert. Thank you very much. There is a very similar dwelling to this in Swaffham, actually, so it's not unusual. It's only a bit Tom Jones then. I've got Councillor Attewell, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I ask the agent some questions about the design, please, just to clarify a few things for me? Obviously, it's quite difficult to tell from the black and white drawing. What are the elevation materials made of? It looks like you've got quite a lot of boarding going on there. Will that just be allowed natural wood to colour it? Go a lot of wood in that situation sort of goes a silvery grey colour. Is it the intention to leave it like that, or is it going to be something else? I presume some of that is stonework that I'm looking on the elevations. And is the roof a sedum roof, or is that just a flat rubberized type roof? That is a sedum roof. That's good. And one last concern. I'm assuming that what I'm looking at on there is some rather large roof lights. Will we have an issue with regard to light pollution on a dwelling this size with that much light emitting through the roof in that location? Is that something? I think there's been something mentioned about lighting. Is that something that we need to have consideration to, bearing in mind our climate and environmental credentials as a council? Other than that, I think it's a great design. I like the layout. I'm with Keith. I think it's good to have something contemporary like that. So that's just my concern on the light, really. And if you could just confirm to me about the roof and the boarding, what the colour of that will be, please. Thank you.
Are you happy for me to answer, Chairman?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Attewell. So starting with the last point, the roof lights are at the rear of the building in order to bring natural light into the rear of those living spaces deliberately, because we didn't want to put any opening lights onto the north elevation, A, because of the weather issues there, and secondly, because we want to effectively turn our back on the road, which is also noisy, given it is quite close to the junction. So those roof lights are there to provide natural light. I would anticipate during the hours of daylight that they would be doing just that. But I would also anticipate that they would be shuttered in some way internally to prevent light spillage out at night. I wouldn't want to see light pollution sort of beaming up to Mars or wherever we're going to be, or signalling to the International Space Station. The external materials are a combination of timber, as you rightly say. The timber we're using on the Pig Patch House, which is next door, is actually larch. That larch can be stained or it can be left to weather naturally. That really often is a personal preference, because if you stain it to seal it, you then have to continue to do that. The beauty of these timbers is that over time they become very sustainable because they do weather, and the natural oils in the material prevent the deterioration of the timber itself. You don't have to keep recoating it. So I would not anticipate that we'd be treating the timber. As far as the other two materials, and there are only three, there's glazing clearly on the south side with brise soleil, because it is a south elevation, so we want to prevent solar gain, excessive solar gain coming in, but at the same time we want to provide the best views out of that particular property and let maximum light in. The gables are essentially in large cobble blocks. There are some very good examples of these up in North Norfolk, where you, instead of having the very traditional labour-intensive and frankly quite unsustainable material of cobbles and flints being laid manually, you actually buy these blocks in and they interlock a little bit like a jigsaw puzzle and give a solid bookend feel to the building. They're also incredibly robust, and weathering is quite natural. I hope that answers your questions.
Yes, would you want to come back, Councillor Attwell?
Yeah, I'm just, thank you for that answer. It's very comprehensive. So on these roof lights, you say you anticipate there would be some sort of shuttering system on there. Is that something, and I'm probably looking at Rebecca, is that something that we would consider a condition on that as part of the light output, that there is some kind of shutter? I mean, I know Velux windows do they do all the automatic shutters and blinds and stuff. That's fairly simple stuff to fit. Is that something that we should, because this really is a good example of an eco house, should we not go the extra mile and condition that so there is that shuttering on those in the evening?
Rebecca, please.
Sorry, councillors, while you've been talking, I've just been having a read of the ecology report, which has obviously been to our ecologists for approval. So they've got no concerns about the immediate lighting of the property, including external lights. So if they've got no problem with the immediate lighting of the building, and I'd say they haven't got any problem with the lighting. It's the spread of lighting that they want to limit, and therefore they've recommended mitigation measures in that regard. And then our ecologists have further suggested that we condition the mitigation measures as per the ecology report. So I'd say it wasn't a concern. I'd be concerned about adding a condition if it wasn't reasonable to do so. But obviously from my earlier presentation, I did suggest that you, as now the ecologists are happy, our statutory ecologists are happy, apologies, that you delegate the matter of ecology back to officers. And what I will do, councillors, is I'll go back to our own ecologists and put the concerns about the roof lights and see if that needs to be a condition that they would suggest, or they feel that the conditions, i.e. the mitigation measures that are already set out in the ecology report and recommended to be conditioned, are sufficient with regards to protecting ecology.
Yes, Councillor.
Or we could just ask the agent if he's willing to accept a condition on the roof lights having some kind of shuttering system in the evening, and we can do away with all that right here and now.
I'm very happy to do that. I see no problem with that at all. And in fact, I would anticipate any occupier of that building would also want to do that, unless of course they wanted to do a bit of stargazing from now and then when we get the next meteor passing over.
They can walk outside to do that though.
Councillor Bryan.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just a little bit concerned that Brecon Council can start putting conditions on that tell somebody they've got to shut the curtains. You know, all houses have some form of curtains. Yes, that's but you can't put a condition on telling somebody that they've got to shut the curtains. If they want to sit there with lights on or lights off, it's going to be their house. And I really don't see as a council that we can start putting conditions on that sort of thing.
Funnily enough,
yes,
Graham, I was going to say something very similar. So although the agent may agree to a condition, obviously us as members of the planning team and you as councillors can only apply conditions that meet the necessary tests, which include being reasonable and enforceable. Yeah, I think it would be very difficult to insist that the shutters are shut at specialist times. Like I say, I've had a read of the ecology report in this context. They're not concerned about lighting of the immediate building, so even external lighting is allowed. So what would be the difference from a security light, which they would be allowed a certain wattage, to an internal light spillage, for example, is what we're concerned about. And therefore, I would agree with Councillor Brahim that unless the ecologists have specific concerns in this regard, that it would be unreasonable to add a condition like that. But I'm happy to go away and have a conversation with them in that regard.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Attwell, is this another point?
just to say that in my day job, I do lighting. So the modern lighting now is all designed so it shines downwards, like street lighting. That's all designed so we try and maintain our dark skies wherever possible. I totally get what Councillor Brame is saying about you can't say that people have to keep their curtains shut, but we're talking about light that's going to emit upwards. And if these roof lights are considerable in their size, and they look like that to me on the drawing, that was all I was just trying to mitigate. And I said, I've asked the agent said he's happy, but if Rebecca said she's going to speak to the ecologist, I'm equally happy with that. But I think that point needs to be made. It is a very good eco house. I'd like it to be a superb eco house and just go that little bit extra on that. CPRE, etc. They like they've got a campaign to try and retain our dark skies where we can, and this is a very rural location, so I think that's something that I would like to see. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No more further questions on this item. Oh, Councillor Clark.
Yeah, it's not a question. It's an observation about this application and others. Sometimes in the past we've commended good design, sometimes in self-build and eco houses, but with pressure of time and obviously now COVID, we haven't been able to make site visits when things have been completed. So perhaps at some point in the distant future, we might be able to make a visit when things have come to fruition in one or two of these sites as good examples that we can promote as a planning authority. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. No more further questions. Okay, thank you. So can I confirm that all members have heard the application in full before the vote is taken? You're all okay? Thank you. Okay, so on this item for Stowbeeden / Breckles, 3PL 2019-0897, your officer's recommendation is one of approval. Julie, could you take the roll, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Wilkinson?
4.
Councillor Atterwill?
4, and I assume that incorporates what Rebecca was saying about looking at the ecologist again and delegating that. Is that correct? Just to clarify, thank you. Yeah, I'm 4.
Councillor Brame?
4.
Councillor Bushell?
4.
Councillor Chapman-Allen?
4.
Councillor Clark?
4.
Councillor Dale?
4.
Councillor Digan?
4.
Councillor Gilbert?
4.
Councillor Martin?
4.
And Councillor Kybird.
4.
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much. This item is approved. We are only 2 minutes off R1 for Thetford. So we say goodbye to Mr. Philip Cowan. Thanks, good to see you.
Likewise, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've had a couple of people contacting me through texting and messaging with regards to the timing. Unfortunately, we have to stick to a timing because people will come to just see one item, so they don't want to sit there. We don't have the luxury like we do in the committee suite of people having to sit there. So they come and they have to have a time when they know their application is going to be heard. So we can't do before that time, but we can overrun and they can wait, but we can't do it any other time. So I do apologise. It is a little bit stagnated. It was one of my own complaints, but there's no other way to do it. I'd love to invent something, but unfortunately we can't. This is definitely with us, I've been told, until May. We'll see that afterwards. Julie?
Chair, should I let I think it's the applicant? Yes. Should I let?
Yeah, Mr. Bridgham, please.
Yes, because I think we're nearly.
Yes, please.
But obviously you can't start discussing it until, 2:45, which it is now.
Which is no.
Chair, and then we need to take Councillor Kybird before we start the item.
Oh, yes, we do, yes. Councillor Kybird, do you have an interest in this item?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I made a comment on this application before I was appointed to substitute to the Planning Committee, and I therefore may be considered predetermined or prejudiced, and I will therefore leave the meeting at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for sitting in as well as a reserve. Cheerio. Okay, that's fine. Welcome, Mr. Bridgham.
Good afternoon.
So this is Thetford Land at Pike Lane, 3PL 2019-1228, and that's over to you, please, Rebecca.
Thank you. So yes, thank you. So we're at Thetford. We're in Thetford Town Centre, Thetford Conservation Area. And as you'll note from the officer's report, the site is quite close to some listed buildings within the not within the application site, but has a relative proximity to those. So the application is for 6 starter homes. This is the application site outlined in red for you on the plan in front of you, on the aerial plan in front of you. So you can note from the aerial photograph that the application site is surrounded by buildings along Old Market Street and Cattle Street. And then to the south, you can see the access to the site. Don't know if you can see my cursors, but this is Pike Lane here to the south of the site. So you can see it's surrounded by almost prominently 2-storey buildings to its north and west elevations of the application site. We'll show you some photos of the site as it stands today. It has actually been cleared of the vegetation, it looks, and it's just an open site behind boundaries at the backs of these properties, and that's quite clearly explained in the officer report. You'll note from the officer report that we've had some representations raising concerns, and from the supplementary report raising concerns about the site being located behind the back of these, which are primarily shops and units associated with the town centre. We've had specific concerns from a dog grooming parlour about if we were allowed to allow residential in this location, the noise impacts, and also some concerns about allowing further movement in this location, leading to further antisocial behaviour on the site. You'll note from the officer report that in principle, it's acceptable to have residential development in the town centre where it doesn't unduly impact the vitality and viability of that town centre. And also the NPPF supports the use of residential in town centre locations to actually increase their viability. And also you'll note from my officer report that we believe that increased surveillance in this location, and when you see the photos of the site, will only be of benefit to the local area and the rears of properties. And although town centre locations can be noisy locations, it is acceptable to have residential in those locations, and that noise tends to be a daytime noise, which will then then create acceptable living arrangement for people within the evenings. So here's the location plan submitted with the application site to show the site behind the back of those buildings. Here are the 6 starter units arranged in a staggered fashion across the site. You'll note that they've been described as prefab modular buildings within this application site. So there is a staggered approach. You'll note there has been concerns raised during the application process about the amount of amenity space that's available to these properties, and we can discuss that in a minute. Also, you'll note from this site plan showing that there is no car parking allocated for this application site. The Highways Authority have come back on that regard, and they're not objecting to the application, but they do want a safe and secure cycle storage if the development could go forward, which could be subject to a suitably worded condition, along with a suitable bin store to serve the development. But you'll note from this site plan that there's no car parking and the amount of outdoor amenity space. If you can see this, members, this is just to show you the relationships of the prefab buildings with the surrounding built development, to show that it is the prefab buildings are single story as proposed, and the surrounding development is majority 2-story or higher, and therefore will well screen the applications for site from the surrounding area. And please don't forget we are in the conservation area. So here's the typical elevations and layout of one of the modular buildings that is proposed. So you'd have a shared bedroom come living space with a kitchenette and a shower room to the rear corner of the unit. You'll note that the units from the site plan are all attached together on their side elevations, and therefore the principal amount of fenestration would only be on one elevation, and you can see it on the plan in front of you, comprising of a window and a glazed door. Here's some images of the site just to show you how the site could be laid out, the approach to the site, the building set in their context, obviously all single story, and the frontages proposed to them. And I just want to show you some photos of the site. So here's the site as it sits currently. You can see that it's been cleared. You can see those surrounding higher buildings, and you can see some boundary treatments of usual height to the boundaries of the application site. But you can see it's large and clear and open. You can see some detritus on the site that's been left behind from some of the behaviour that people are concerned on. But you can see that it's generally a wide open site. Now, as you can see from the application proposals, we have had the application for a little while now. When the applicants initially came in with the application, and you can read this in paragraph 1.1 of your report, they were proposing that this could be used as temporary housing. And therefore, we spent some time with our housing colleagues considering whether it could be used as temporary housing. But you'll note from the report, there's no need for further temporary housing in Thetford, because of the Elm Road scheme that we've already permitted and is underway. Now, the reason this is relevant to you members is that this application actually does not comply with one of the policies in your local plan, HOW 13, which requires all new development to meet the nationally prescribed space standards. This is set out in paragraph 4.5 of your officer report for your information. So just in summary, the size of the individual modular units is 25 square metres, and the minimum size of an individual unit is 37 square metres. So it's significantly below the size what it would be required to be an open residential unit, so used what we normally permit for residential purposes. I've also noted that obviously there's very limited access to amenity space and obviously no car parking, which would be acceptable in this town centre location. The reason I'm bringing all this to your attention is because obviously, like I say, initially the applicants had a very honourable prospect of bringing this forward as temporary housing. And the council has reviewed that, and unfortunately we don't have that requirement for temporary housing. We did have a long conversation with the applicants about, sorry, a wasp just flew into me. We did have a long conversation with the applications about bringing it forward as a more longer term housing need. However, we don't have a council scheme set up for that type of housing scheme. And obviously, to secure it for those purposes, we need to be able to write a section 106 and tie it to the scheme. We did offer the applicants the opportunity to go away and look at what that scheme could be like, that provided whether they linked up with local charities or groups that already exist in Thetford, which provide this more longer term but temporary housing to meet particular needs, often that they're managed. We did give them the opportunity to go away and come back with a scheme that we could consider putting into a section 106 agreement, which may well overcome our concerns about the size of the units. However, unfortunately, the applicants have been unable to devise such a scheme and would like this scheme to be considered as open residential. And on that basis, it is contrary to policy because they're quite a considerable size below the nationally prescribed space standards. And therefore, councillors, we've recommended this one for refusal.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Bridgham, you have 3 minutes to talk, sir. Thank you.
Right, good afternoon, councillors. We're talking about the Pike Lane site. What we were trying to create here was a replacement for, or the next stage on from a HMO. So working with a number of homeless charities locally and young people that work within our business, there was a defined lack of single person living accommodation, which wasn't being met. We wanted to find a solution to provide accommodation at the right price and a high standard. So we developed this modular concept, which we could build in one of our factories in Thetford, which would build a high quality, highly insulated, sustainable unit, but would be a very compact. You know, it does fall below the national space standards and the Breckland local plan. I completely agree with that. But what we wanted to try and achieve was that if you're a single person, often the only solution is to be housed in a HMO. And we looked at the space standards within a HMO, and for having a combined bedroom, living room and kitchen, so all of the services we're providing within one room, is 13 square metres. Obviously, what we're aiming to give is 20 square metres. It's not the 37 square metres, but our property in all but name or a combined corridor is a HMO. And the lady said about us working with a local charity to have some support, but when we talked to the homeless charities, they said that they needed to keep the homeless people in a larger development where they could offer the services wrapped up in that. But then when those people were ready to leave, there wasn't really anywhere for them to go. It was this follow-on care. So they needed somewhere that was small and containable, because there's sort of like a type of bed blocking in the local homeless hostels, because people can't afford to get a job because they can't pay the rent of the homeless hostel, but then they can't move out because there's nowhere for them to move out to. You know, this is an innovative project. That's not the right word, but you know, it's something where I think Thetford could lead on this. And I'm happy, you know, it doesn't fit the current guidelines. It falls between this HMO and a house. It's not a house. It's something in the middle that's got no definition, and I don't know how to define it to fit it into a box. So it fits between the 13 square metres of a HMO with a combined living room and kitchen, and a house which is 37 square metres. So we're in this middle ground. We want to provide a Thetford built high quality solution to single person living accommodation, and it took us a long time to find a landowner with a site that would take this project on. And then obviously that space standard hadn't been adopted when we first started talking about this. So we've sort of got caught in the middle, but I'm not complaining. I just want to find a solution. You know, I've got young people, because of the disparate nature of Norfolk. Sorry.
Mr. Bridget,
I use my
your
time
3
up.
minutes are up, sir. Yeah, your passion is quite evident. Okay, no, thank you. Okay, it's open to questions from members. Do members have any questions at all on this item? Councillor Atwell, Councillor Wilkinson, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I ask the applicant some questions, please? Can you just clarify, these proposed dwellings, will they be for market sale, or will they be retained in the ownership of yourselves and they will be rented out? What is the proposal for that arrangement? If you could answer that first.
The business model would be for us to retain ownership and rent them out. That's why all the units will be identical. And this is a plan to make hundreds of these in the future. And so we've got this sustainable model where they're highly insulated, they're built to a high standard, because we want to retain ownership of all of them and rent them out. Okay,
so thank you for that. You mentioned homeless people, and this is I think the concept is that this is sort of a halfway house to get them back on their feet. Is that how you envisage this?
This is for all people, but some of them are homeless people that have been in, you know, like John Room House in Thetford and need somewhere to move next. It's for the young apprentices or people getting back into work who need to move to this area. We've got people applying for jobs from Ipswich. Well, they can't travel every day, but there's no solution for housing for those people. So it's the step before they can afford a house. That's how we see it. But most people don't want to live in a HMO where they have to share resources. This is the cheapest way of getting them their own front door.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Attwell?
Yeah, can I just say on that, Chairman, I've got some experience of dealing with a homeless gentleman. I think I've said this at full council before, and having to bring him down to Thetford at Christmas time, and knowing his personal circumstances, I know there's a lot of people like him who need that helping hand as a transition back to get themselves on their feet. I think this personally is a superb idea. I hear what we're saying about the design standard, but I do think that this is something, we talked about innovative design earlier on. I think this is such a design that us as a council need. And I can't see, unless Rebecca can tell me otherwise, I can't see a report on here from the housing officer. I can't see it on the portal. I can't see that in your report. Have I missed that?
Right, there's a question there that's directed to you, please, Rebecca.
Councillor Attwell, because it's not affordable housing, it's open residential housing. And just to be really clear to members, although we completely support the concept, there is no way for us to condition or require this to be used for a set group of people. So homeless people, we couldn't condition or require to be rented out and not sold. It would be open residential dwellings that you're permitting on the basis that on the basis of what the applicant's prepared to do with it. And I'm not debating their intentions or their goodwill in this regard, but we cannot require them through a Section 106 agreement or a condition to give it, rent it, sell it specifically to one group of people. So it would be an open residential permission that we'd have no control on in terms of value of sale or value of rent or specific user groups. So I just want to be, I'm not trying to dismiss the concept or the intention. I'm just telling you the reality of the planning process in this regard.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Attwell, could you just sit on your hand for a moment? I will come back to you. I just want to take two more people who wish to ask questions. I've got Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Councillor Attwell highlighted what I was going to ask, and Rebecca gave us the answers, so I'll leave that there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Clark. Then I've got Councillor Chapman-Allen, Councillor Gilbert.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I've heard what the applicant said, looked at the plans. I think these are very laudable aims, and it's a pity that it's fallen short on the space standards. And I know sometimes we get contradictions which seem quite bizarre, as the applicant highlighted, in terms of what you can achieve and what's available in an HMO as opposed to the space standards for this. But unfortunately, we're constrained by this. I really support the laudable aims in terms of having such accommodation, which maybe sounds as if it'd be affordable for single people in that area. And I hope that although this, if this application is refused, I would still hope that outside the planning process, or potentially outside the planning department, that with housing or other people in Breckland, I know Rebecca referred to the lack of any sort of framework here, and whether there's a body or grouping within the council that can work on a framework, and perhaps Rebecca and Simon can advise on that, going forward outside the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Clark. Do you want to come straight back there, please, Rebecca?
Just two things, if it'll help, Chairman, thank you. I'm just a bit concerned about you comparing it to a HMO, because it's not a HMO and there is a definition of that. And just to be really clear, the space standards are generally a lot lower with a HMO because you have other shared spaces that are available to you, a shared kitchen, which will be much larger, a shared living room. You have other spaces within that building, not always, but generally other spaces that you share with other parties. So I get the concept of saying, it might be a preference to have a unit to yourself, but when we're comparing it in size standards, it's not appropriate to compare it to a HMO because you'd usually have access to other shared spaces. In terms of Councillor Clark's query about whether the council can come up with a scheme, we've tried. We can't come up with a scheme. We don't have an identifiable scheme or a set of wording that would be appropriate to use for this interim follow-up move-on accommodation. We're more than happy to investigate it with the applicant and still going forward. But what we've said to the applicant is the emphasis is back on you to come up with a scheme and a wording that could be written into a Section 106 agreement for the concept that you've got. And then we'll consider that on the basis of the size of the units as another material consideration. To date, the applicants have been unable to do that in the same way we've been unable to do that as a council. And therefore it is an open residential, which has been assessed against policy, and it is contrary to that policy, members.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chapman-Allen, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Rebecca, could you tell me if, is it the size of the modular units your basic reason for refusal?
Yes.
Thank you. Well, I think if the units were of a different size and design, I might have a different viewpoint on it. But to be quite honest, I think that the suggestion, although it's a very good suggestion, that it's helping homeless people, doesn't butter any parsnips for me, because Breckland Council are working very hard at the moment to look into providing units for homeless people. And the other question is, Rebecca, that the proposal is that they would be to rent. If the applicant wanted to sell them privately, would he be able to do that?
Absolutely. There is no way we can condition these to be for a certain group or to be only for rent.
Well, as I said, and I could be proved completely wrong, and I'm all for supporting homeless people, but I think that this is a bit of a fop, to be quite honest. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Gilbert, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I was a bit surprised to hear in the presentation that we have no need for this sort of accommodation because we've got another one somewhere in Thetford. I would have thought the need for this sort of accommodation is vast. We are being told we have a higher housing crisis in this country. People are homeless. People do need to move on. People need to leave home and set up on their own. So the concept is great. I could support the concept 100%, but I'm very disturbed about the way it is going, that it's basically a private company saying we're going to make these tiny little boxes and we might rent them out, we might sell some, because there's no control over who we're going to help. So the concept, yes, and I'm sure is within our whatever to actually come to an agreement somewhere with a provider, registered housing provider maybe, or one of the housing associations, which would help the bottom end of the market to come up with a scheme which is workable and not open market housing, which this would be. So the concept, yes. The detail, no. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to go back to you now, Councillor Atwell, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to reiterate my point earlier, we've got no report from the Housing Department at Breckland at all, whether it's affordable or not. I would have liked to have seen something about the need for one-bedroom accommodation. Is there a need in accordance with the SHMA? But I can't see anything on here where the Housing Department at Breckland, and yes, I hear what Councillor Chapman-Allen is saying, that they are working hard to try and find solutions, but is this something that is needed? I hear the pitfalls with this particular scheme. The applicant has already admitted as much, that he can see that there's some flaws that he perhaps needs to work on, but is there the need, before he goes and wastes a load of money trying to do another scheme, is there a need for this? We don't have any report from the Housing Department, and I would have liked to have seen something from them, whether it's affordable or not, on the need for those type of dwellings.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Attwell. Rebecca, could you just reply?
Yes, see, there's a bit of a confusion of matters there. So the housing team would only deal with the need for affordable housing. It's not affordable housing. It can't be affordable housing. One, we couldn't require it because it's less than 9 units or half a hectare to be affordable housing. So yes, we know there's a need for one bed affordable housing, but it's not affordable housing and can't be required as such because it doesn't meet the conditions of being required as such and isn't promoted as affordable housing. We don't have a need for the temporary accommodation because we have the Elm Road scheme. I'm sorry if members would have preferred to see that in writing, but me and the housing colleagues and indeed the agent have spent a lot of time discussing this in meetings about how we could evolve the concept into something that would work in policy terms and also serve, you know, exactly what Councillor Gilbert is saying, you know, the population as in the way that we want to serve it. In terms of the SHMA, there may be a need for a certain type of residential unit, but that residential unit needs to meet the policies of the local plan. And the policies of local plan include the nationally prescribed space standards to date. And it is significantly below those minimum space standards at less than 25 square metres to the minimum of 37 square metres. And therefore, although there may be a need for 1-bedroom units, they need to be appropriate in terms of living accommodation, because that's what our policy says. They need to meet the future needs of occupants. And, you know, our local plan tells us that anything below those nationally prescribed space standards wouldn't meet the future needs and amenity of those future occupants. And that's why this one's recommended for refusal.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Wilkinson. I hope this is a question, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Could I ask Mr. Bridgham if he did go up to the square meterage of the UK standard space size, how many units would he lose of that? I can't work out this for some just by looking at the plans. So if you go ahead with that one, then I can.
There'd be 3 units rather than 6, and it wouldn't become financially viable.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you. That's that answered. Any further questions, please, on this item? No. Okay, thank you. So can I confirm that all members have heard the application in full before the vote is taken? Yes, you've all heard it. Thank you very much. So on this application, which is Thetford Land at Pike Lane, 3PL 2019-1228, your officer's recommendation on this is one of refusal. Julie, could you please take the roll?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Martin.
Refused.
Councillor Gilbert.
For refusal.
Councillor Dygan.
For the recommendation.
Councillor Dale.
For the recommendation.
Councillor Clark.
Refusal, reluctantly.
Councillor Chapman-Allen.
For the recommendation.
Councillor Bushell.
For the recommendation.
Councillor Brame.
Against.
Is that against the refusal, Councillor Brame?
That's correct.
Thank you. Councillor Attewell.
Against.
And Councillor Wilkinson.
Reluctantly for.
Thank you.
Okay.
8 for the refusal and 2 against.
8-2. Okay. Have we lost someone? We should have 11.
Councillor Kybird.
Oh, yes, we lost Kay. I thought we did have 11. I knew we'd lost someone. We threw him out. Okay, so so this item is refused, but could I just say to Mr. Bridgham before we throw him out as well, is I think if you judge from what the councillors are saying, you're on the right track. You're just riding the wrong pony, I think. So there is some mileage, and I think there's some more work that we need to work together with regard to some of the departments and the various members and officers in Breckland to take this concept forward. I know for a fact that this type of scheme worked very well in parts of Holland. Especially, I know there was one, quite an extensive one around a port area, where a harbour area where there's where they actually started stacking them as well. So I think you're on the right track, sir, but unfortunately not today with this particular site and this particular application. But thanks for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members. Next item. We've got item 10 is applications determined by the Executive Director of Place, which are there for your information. And then item 11, which the appeals decisions for information only. I'd like to thank you for being here today, especially those who have stood in, and some at very short notice. I'd just like to have Julie, Mike, Rebecca and Councillor Daigan just to stay behind, please. And I say farewell to all of the rest of you.